Man, I am so excited for Tatsuro Taira versus Joshua Van. I promise I'm not racist. I just like pronouncing names the way they're meant to be pronounced, even though I never get them right, let's be honest. The reason why I'm excited is because I don't think Joshua Van has faced any legitimate grappling threat up until this point in his career. The second time would have been against Alexandre Pantosia. The first time was against Ray Turia, and Ray Turia was like super duper young. If I'm correct, that was probably his debut. Brandon Royval could have been a legitimate threat, but he chose to strike for the entirety of the fight. And I felt like that wasn't really a smart move because with how close the fight was, there was no certainty that he was going to win it. And knowing that Joshua Van had only faced one grappler, a guy who isn't even that notable in the UFC, you could have at least shot for one takedown, test the waters, and maybe chain wrestle him to a decision. But nope, he chose to strike. And I don't completely blame him because he did win a lot of the striking exchanges. He won one round, and if not for the knockdown, there's a chance that he potentially would have walked away with a decision. Now, when he went up against Pantoja, I was very confident that Pantoja was going to win, and the odds say it. Pantoja is super duper experienced. Joshua Van only started training MMA when he was like 18, and the dude is probably under the age of 27, right? Yeah, I can confirm that he is. Isn't he like 25 or something this year? The pressure would have been too much for him. The chain wrestling, the low kicks, the boxing, which I think Pantoja's striking is not bad at all. I'm not gonna say it's the best in the division, but he can hold his own, man. He can stand there with some of the best guys, or at least long enough until he gets a takedown. I was very disappointed with the outcome of that fight. I mean, yeah, Joshua Van beat Pantoja, but I know somewhere at the back of Pantoja's mind, he's thinking to himself. I don't know if you've seen that clip of that chef on Hell's Kitchen where he's like, so and so didn't win, I lost. Let's be real. Joshua Van won. He was the rightful winner. It's not his fault that Pantoja broke his arm. And Joshua Van had it in his mind that he was going to beat Pantoja that night. And it just so happened to be in one of the most anticlimactic ways possible. And it's not his fault, like I said before. But at the same time, 10 years down the line, we're not going to be looking back to the time when Joshua Van dominated Alexandre Pantoja in the first round. If we're going to call any fight a fluke, it has to be this one, not headshot dead. Leon Edwards knew what he wanted to do. He's always had a good head kick. He's landed that on so many guys, Cowboy Cerrone, Bilal Muhammad, and so forth. Whereas with Joshua Van, he didn't even know what was going on in the moment. But I digress. I'm very confident that Tatsuro Taira might actually look really good against Joshua Van. And I'm not surprised that he's the favorite, really. And I'm glad the odds makers made him the favorite. Honestly, I don't really care what they do. I just know that I watch the sport and I form my own opinions. The reason why I'm confident is because I've been watching film and this kid is crazy. I know he's older than me, but he's younger than most of the guys he faces, aside from Joshua Van, of course. Man, like his top control, it's insane. It's something that you don't usually see in the lower weight classes at the highest level. Like, sure, if a guy outside of the rankings is facing a tomato can, yeah, sure, you might be able to backpack them to a decision. But the way he just latches onto his opponents, did you see how he finished Brandon Moreno? Like, and Brandon is no slouch, man, not at all. Steve couldn't do that, Pantoja couldn't do that, but then Tatsuro just flans him out and finishes him with vicious ground and pound. And then against Brandon Royval, yes, he lost that fight. But in the rounds that he was winning, that being the second and the fourth, it was insane. He controlled him for almost the entire round in round two, he flanned him out. And Brandon was trying to scramble, trying to escape. At times he had some success, but just Tatsuro's understanding of positioning was similar to someone like Khabib. Brandon would roll in attempts to escape, and then Tatsuro would just secure the power half, put him in the body triangle, control him to a decision, land minimal ground and pound. It looked beautiful, honestly. Even against Alex Perez. Yes, I don't think Alex Perez is like an A or an S tier fighter in the division. I think he's either B on his way to being A after his performance against Charles Johnson. Tatsuro just latches onto your back, and it's almost like there's nothing you can do to break free. So you just can't allow him to get there in the first place. But my only issue with this style is it's very tiring. And in 5 rounders, it's going to work heavily against him because remember, he had a dominant performance in the second round. Then in the third, he was gassed. And that's the round where he took the most damage from Brandon. Brandon was landing flurries of punches. It almost looked like he was going to finish him at times. After watching the Brandon fight and his previous fight against Alex Perez, I knew that there was no way this guy is going to outstrike even Brandon Moreno. And that's exactly what happened. Because if you go back to the fight, Brandon landed the biggest strike of the entire fight. And it didn't really matter because the grappling was so dominant. But against someone like Brandon Royval, it's not going to be that easy. I think Brandon Royval is just a little more consistent than Moreno. Like Moreno at this point, I really don't know which fights he's going to win or lose. And just looking back at the difference in significant strikes in his fight against Brandon Royval, it was 3-1, bro. Brandon Royval landed a total of 124 significant strikes compared to Tatsuro's 42, which is it's not a good look. I used to say this guy has like zero hands, but then I watched this fight against Hyang Sung Park and I was like, okay, fine. Maybe I was a tad bit wrong. But I just don't think he can hang in there with the best guys in the division. He's low volume, doesn't have that much pop. I think he's physically strong, but he's more of like a Khabib strong, where it only works in the grappling exchanges. You know, he's not like fast twitch or anything like that. So yeah, I think what's most probably going to happen is he's probably not going to strike that much against Joshua Van because Joshua has just as much, if not more, volume than a Brandon Royval. I think he's very technical. I said it after that fight that he was the best striker in the division, and I don't think it's going to be any different if he goes up against Tatsuro Taira. But what I don't think he'll be able to do is constantly defend all of the takedown attempts of Taira. I think Taira times them very well. At some point, he did eat a knee against Brandon Royval, but that was only once. For the most part, he was usually able to secure the takedown or at the very least get Brandon up against the fence. So I don't think it's going to be any different against Joshua Van. So what's most probably going to happen is I see a submission happening before the fourth round, most probably in the third. Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.